You know what the British Royal Navy fired torpedoes at during the largest naval battle in history? It wasn't a German submarine. It was something moving twice as fast as any underwater technology from 1916. Something glowing beneath the water with blue-green light. Something that vanished instantly when they tried to destroy it. Tonight, you're going to discover the testimony the British Admiralty has kept classified for over 100 years.
May 31st, 1916, North Sea, 90 nautical miles west of the Jutland Peninsula. The Battle of Jutland was entering its 7th hour of continuous combat. 249 warships, 100,000 sailors, the largest naval confrontation the world had witnessed up to that moment. To understand the magnitude of this battle, you've got to realize that Jutland represented the clash of two completely opposing naval philosophies. The British Grand Fleet had dominated the seas for over a century, since Trafalgar. The German High Seas Fleet was the challenging force, built specifically to break the British naval blockade that was strangling Germany. The British Grand Fleet, under Admiral Sir John Jellicoe, faced the German High Seas Fleet, commanded by Vice Admiral Reinhard Scheer. 150 British ships against 99 German ships spread across miles of gray North Sea waters. The British deployed 28 dreadnought battleships, 9 battle cruisers, 34 light cruisers, and 80 destroyers. The Germans responded with 16 dreadnought battleships, 5 battle cruisers, 11 light cruisers, and 61 destroyers. The combined firepower was unimaginable. 12, 13, and 15-inch guns, firing shells weighing as much as a small car at distances over 10 miles. Among those ships operated HMS Turbulent, a Talisman-class destroyer assigned to the 4th Destroyer Flotilla. Its mission was protecting British battle cruisers from German submarine attacks. Turbulent was a relatively new ship, launched in 1915 with a displacement of 1,100 tons and a crew of 96 men. She was armed with 3 4-inch guns, 1 3-inch anti-aircraft gun, and 4 torpedo tubes. Her top speed was 34 knots, making her one of the fastest destroyers in the Grand Fleet. Turbulent had been in continuous action since 1520 hours, when the fleets first sighted each other. Weather conditions were typical for the North Sea in May. Cloudy skies, visibility 2 to 3 miles, moderate seas, water temperature 8 degrees Celsius. The limited visibility meant many ships never saw their enemies directly, firing based solely on coordinates transmitted by other vessels or aerial observers.
Lieutenant Commander James Hartwell, executive officer of Turbulent, was 29 years old. Born in Portsmouth, he joined the Royal Navy in 1905 when he was barely 18. His father had been an artillery officer on HMS Victory, Nelson's legendary flagship. His older brother had died in 1914 during the Battle of Coronel. Naval service was in his blood, but so was loss. He'd served aboard HMS Dreadnought, the revolutionary battleship that changed naval warfare from 1906 to 1910. He transferred to destroyer service in 1912, accumulating 4 years of experience in anti-submarine operations. He'd survived the Battle of Heligoland Bight in 1914, where he witnessed 3 German light cruisers sink in a matter of hours. He'd commanded torpedo attacks during the Doggerbank action in 1915, where the German battlecruiser Blucher was sent to the bottom with over 700 men aboard. Among his crew, he was known as a methodical officer, precise in his observations, intolerant of unfounded speculation. Hartwell had a specific skill that set him apart. He knew how to read hydrophone contacts. The hydrophone was relatively new technology in 1916. Essentially an underwater microphone, it allowed operators to detect the sound of engines and propellers at distances of several miles under favorable conditions. But interpreting those signals required experience and judgment. The ocean was full of sounds: whales, schools of fish, ocean currents, even the creaking of the ship's own hull. He could distinguish between friendly submarines, German U-boats, whales, spills, schools of fish, and detection equipment failures. He knew the acoustic signature of a British E-class submarine, the distinctive sound of its two-stroke Vickers diesel engines, the softer hum when switching to submerged electric propulsion. He could identify a German U-boat by the particular rhythm of its MAN or Curting engines, the cavitation pattern of its bronze propellers. That technical experience made him a particularly credible witness to what he was about to detect. At 21:47 hours on May 31st, as darkness fell over the North Sea, everything changed. But what Turbulent's hydrophone operator detected at that moment didn't resemble any submarine that existed in 1916. Able seaman Thomas Grant operated HMS Turbulent's hydrophone from his station in the acoustic detection compartment. Grant was 23 years old, from Liverpool, and had spent 2 years specializing in underwater detection. He'd grown up on Liverpool's docks, son of a stevedore. He knew the sound of the sea since childhood. Waves pounding against the breakwater, cargo ships creaking, wind whistling through rigging. That familiarity with ocean sounds had made him an exceptionally skilled hydrophone operator. He'd correctly identified 17 German submarine contacts during his service, resulting in 4 confirmed kills. He knew the exact sound of German diesel engines, the hum of electric motors when U-boats operated submerged, even the acoustic differences between different submarine classes. A UB-2 class U-boat made a slightly different sound than a UC-2 class U-boat. Curting engines had a distinct tone from Daimler engines. Grant could distinguish these subtleties even in combat conditions, with the noise of Turbulent's own engines, waves slapping against the hull, and the occasional thunder of artillery in the distance. What he detected at 21:47 hours didn't match any of those profiles. Grant called the bridge immediately. Contact. Submerged, bearing 270 degrees, range approximately 800 meters. His voice, according to accounts from other crew members interviewed decades later, sounded confused, not alarmed, not excited, but genuinely puzzled by what he was hearing. Hartwell ordered the helmsman to turn toward the contact. Over the next 18 minutes, Turbulent's crew observed something that defied all known submarine capabilities. Hartwell's report, transmitted to flagship HMS Iron Duke at 21:51 hours, described the contact with meticulous technical precision. According to Admiralty documents briefly declassified in 1985 before being reclassified again, the contact measured approximately 120 feet long. That size placed it in the range of a UB-2 class German mine-laying submarine, the largest U-boats operational in 1916. UB-2s measured between 180 and 200 feet long, but the transmitted by object was more compact, somehow denser. Grant described the contact as concentrated, as if all the object's mass was contained in a smaller space than should be possible, but its speed was physically impossible. The contact was moving at approximately 60 knots. To understand how impossible this speed was, you need to know the actual capabilities of submarines at the time. The fastest submarine in service in 1916 was the British K-class, capable of reaching 24 knots on the surface and 9 knots submerged.
K-class subs were engineering monsters, submarines over 300 feet long powered by steam turbines on the surface. They were fast for their era, but also dangerous. Sailors called them the Calamity class because they had the terrible habit of sinking accidentally. Of the 18 K-class submarines built, 6 were lost in accidents, killing more British sailors than the German U-boats they were supposedly meant to combat. German U-boats were slower, maximum surface speed of 60 knots, submerged speed of 5 to 8 knots at most. This contact was moving at 60 knots underwater, 7 times faster than a submerged U-boat, 3 times faster than any surface torpedo boat, twice the speed of the fastest destroyers in the Grand Fleet. To put this in additional perspective, the Mark 8 torpedo Turbulent used, the Royal Navy's most advanced anti-submarine weapon, could only reach 45 knots. This object was moving faster than the torpedoes designed to destroy submarines. And most disturbing, it was emitting light. Multiple witnesses on Turbulent's deck reported seeing a blue-green glow beneath the water surface. The luminescence was bright enough to be visible despite the darkness and the object's estimated depth, between 40 and 50 feet below the surface. Petty Officer Michael Brennan, officer of the deck on watch at that moment, described the light in his personal diary as unnatural, as if the object was generating its own luminous energy source. It didn't flicker like a flare. It didn't disperse like marine phosphorescence. It was constant, intense, and moved with deliberate purpose. Hartwell noted in his report that the glow pulsed rhythmically, approximately once every 3 seconds. No submarine of the era had external lighting. The very idea was absurd. Submarines depended on stealth. Any external light source would make them perfect targets for destroyers and surface ships. Even using a periscope during daylight was risky because it could be spotted. The notion of a submarine deliberately illuminating itself underwater contradicted every principle of submarine warfare. None produced bioluminescence. Some marine animals produced light, certain jellyfish species, some types of plankton, but marine phosphorescence was a weak, diffuse glow, visible only in conditions of complete darkness. This was different. Bright, concentrated, pulsing. No natural phenomenon known in the North Sea matched this description. The phenomenon had no conventional explanation, but when Commander Blackwood ordered an attack on that contact, what happened next would reveal it wasn't just fast. It was capable of maneuvers no human-made machine could execute.
Commander Richard Blackwood, captain of HMS Turbulent, was a 38-year-old veteran with 16 years of naval service. He'd sunk 2 German U-boats in previous actions, UB-16 in March 1916 near Dover and UC-7 in May 1915 off the Belgian coast. Both kills had been confirmed by direct observation of debris and oil slicks. He knew exactly how to attack a submarine contact. The standard procedure was simple: detect, close, fire torpedoes or drop depth charges, confirm the kill. Blackwood had successfully executed this procedure multiple times. There was no reason to think this occasion would be different. At 21:49 hours, he ordered torpedoes fired. HMS Turbulent fired 3 Mark 8 torpedoes at the contact. These torpedoes represented the Royal Navy's most advanced anti-submarine weapon in 1916. Speed of 45 knots, range of 5,000 yards, warhead of 320 pounds of TNT. Each torpedo measured 21 feet long and weighed 1,600 pounds. They were powered by compressed air engines that left a visible bubble trail, allowing observers to track their trajectory. The guidance system was purely mechanical, a gyroscope that kept the torpedo on a straight line and a hydrostatic depth mechanism that maintained it at the set depth. Against a U-boat moving at 5 knots, these torpedoes were practically infallible. A German submarine needed at least 30 seconds to detect an incoming torpedo, make the decision to maneuver, and execute a course change. In that time, a torpedo at 45 knots covered over 1,000 feet. A U-boat's turning radius was approximately 100 yards. The math overwhelmingly favored the torpedo. All 3 missed. According to the log of Turbulent's torpedo officer, preserved in document fragments obtained through Freedom of Information requests in 1997, the contact accelerated at the exact moment the torpedoes entered the water. Hydrophone tracking showed the object's speed increased from 60 knots to over 100 knots in approximately 4 seconds. The acceleration was instantaneous. To put this in perspective, a modern Los Angeles-class nuclear submarine needs 30 seconds to go from static dive to maximum speed. This object did it in 4 seconds. The G-forces involved in such acceleration would have been lethal to any human crew. Grant, the hydrophone operator, reported he could hear the change in acoustic signature. The low-frequency hum he'd been monitoring suddenly increased in pitch and intensity. He described the sound as similar to a turbine spooling up, but without the mechanical component. It was smoother, more continuous, as if the object had no moving parts at all. The mechanical stress would have
destroyed any pressure hull built with 1916 metallurgy.
Submarines of the era were constructed with riveted steel. Rivets were natural weak points. Under extreme stress, they could pop out, causing catastrophic flooding. An acceleration from 60 to 100 knots in 4 seconds would have generated forces that would have literally ripped the steel plates from the hull. Yet the contact executed the maneuver, changed course 90 degrees with an impossible turning radius, and dove to a depth the hydrophones could no longer track. The 90-degree course change was particularly impossible. A U-boat needed several minutes and hundreds of yards to execute such a turn. This object did it instantly, as if the laws of inertia simply didn't apply. The estimated depth exceeded 200 feet. U-boats of the era had a maximum operational depth of 150 feet before the hull began experiencing structural failures. At 200 feet, water pressure was 90 pounds per square inch. U-boat hulls began deforming at those depths. Rivets started weeping. Hatch seals failed. Descending beyond 150 feet was essentially a death sentence. This object was operating beyond the engineering limits of any submarine technology of the era. And then it disappeared. Not gradually, like a submarine executing silent running procedures that slowly fades from detection. It disappeared from the hydrophone signature completely and instantly at 21:53 hours. Grant, the hydrophone operator, described the event in a letter to his parents written 3 days later. It was there, clear as a bell in my headphones, and then it just stopped existing, like someone had flipped a switch. In 2 years doing this job, I'd never experienced anything like it. Submarines don't disappear like that. They fade away gradually. The sound gets fainter, more distant, but this was like the object had ceased to exist instantly in our plane of detection. Turbulence crew searched the area for 30 minutes. Blackwood ordered a methodical search pattern. The destroyer sailed in expanding concentric circles from the point of last detection. Grant kept the hydrophones active continuously. Lookouts on deck scanned the surface with powerful binoculars. They found no floating debris. If the torpedoes had impacted and damaged a submarine, there would have been debris, pieces of wood from interior linings, chunks of cork from life jackets, maybe bodies. They found nothing. They found no oil slicks indicating a damaged submarine. U-boats carried large quantities of diesel fuel. Any hull damage would have resulted in diesel escaping to the surface. Even in darkness, oil was visible. It created a smoother surface on the water, reflected light differently. Experienced sailors could detect oil slicks even at night. There was none. They sighted no periscope. The object had ceased to exist in detectable space. And just when Turbulence crew was beginning to process what had just happened, they discovered they hadn't been the only ones to detect something impossible that night.
Hit that subscribe button if you want to understand how something could move underwater at twice the speed 1916 technology allowed, because what's coming reveals how many other warships detected exactly the same object that night.
Lieutenant Commander Hartwell wasn't the only witness. What makes this case impossible to dismiss as a single operator's error is the sheer number of independent detections. The contact was detected by ships across a front of approximately 12 nautical miles. HMS Acasta, operating 3 miles northwest of Turbulence position, reported hydrophone contact with an object matching the description at 21:46 hours, 1 minute before Turbulence detection. Commander Edward Morrison, captain of Acasta, filed an official report that included a crucial technical observation. Morrison was 41 years old and considered one of the most experienced anti-submarine officers in the Grand Fleet. He'd commanded destroyers for 3 years and had extensively studied German U-boat tactics. His report wasn't the work of a novice officer prone to identification errors. Morrison noted the contact produced an unprecedented, anomalous acoustic signature. It wasn't the characteristic sound of German diesel engines. It wasn't the hum of electric motors. Acasta's hydrophone operators, all with over a year of experience, described the sound as a continuous low-frequency hum, unlike any
any recorded submarine propulsion. Morrison specified in his report, the unprecedented speed combined with the unknown acoustic signature suggests technology exceeding the capabilities of any naval power in 1916. This statement was extraordinary, coming from a senior officer. Morrison wasn't speculating about visitors from another world or fantastic technology. He was simply stating a technical fact. What they detected exceeded any known capability. HMS Ophelia, a destroyer positioned 5 miles to the east, reported visual contact with submerged luminescence at 2150 hours. Lieutenant Robert Ashford, officer of the watch, documented blue-green light source moving beneath the surface at high speed, estimated depth between 30 and 40 feet, bearing changing rapidly. Ashford included an additional detail that amplified the strangeness of the sighting. The light was bright enough to illuminate the surrounding water in a radius of approximately 20 feet. He calculated the luminous intensity equivalent to approximately 50 candles, a luminosity impossible to achieve with any underwater technology of the era. Ashford had studied physics at Cambridge University before joining the Royal Navy. He understood light refraction through water. He knew water absorbs light rapidly, especially blue and green light. For a light source to be visible at 30 or 40 feet depth with such intensity, the original source had to be extraordinarily bright. He estimated the light source must be at least 10 times brighter than any electric lamp available in 1916. HMS Garland, operating with the 13th Destroyer Flotilla, detected the contact on its hydrophones at 2155 hours. The destroyer's executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Henry Blackwell, ordered depth charges launched.
4 charges were deployed, set to detonate at depths of 50 and 100 feet. Witnesses aboard Garland reported the detonations produced the expected water columns. Depth charges of the era contained 300 pounds of TNT each. When they detonated, they created a massive gas bubble that expanded and contracted violently. The shock wave was lethal to anything within a 50-foot radius. Even outside that radius, the pressure was sufficient to break welds, pop rivets, and cause catastrophic damage to submarine hulls. The explosions were powerful enough to kill any crew in a nearby submarine and cause severe hull damage. The object was unaffected. Hydrophone contact continued unchanged. The luminescence remained visible. The object kept moving as if the depth charges hadn't detonated at all. Blackwell, in his official report, noted detonations occurred at appropriate distance from contact based on hydrophone tracking. Any submarine in that location would have been destroyed or severely damaged. Contact showed no indication of damage. Speed unchanged. Course unchanged. Luminescence unchanged. This is inconsistent with any known submarine technology. Even the battlecruiser HMS Lion, Admiral Beatty's flagship, detected something. Lion was a massive ship, 42,000 tons displacement, armed with 8 13-inch guns and 12 4-inch guns. During the battle, she'd taken multiple hits from German shells, but remained operational. Lion's log, examined by researchers in 1997 before sections were reclassified, mentions unidentified submarine contact detected by escort destroyers at 2148 hours. The entry was brief. Classification was immediate. German forces also observed it. Records captured after the war and preserved at the Imperial War Museum show that SMS V-48, a German destroyer, reported unidentified submerged contact with unusual luminescence at 2152 hours. The report, submitted to High Seas Fleet Command, described an object that did not match any known Allied submarine design and displayed impossible speed characteristics. V-48 had attempted to attack the contact with their own torpedoes. Like Turbulent, all of their torpedoes missed. The German report described the object accelerating at speed exceeding capabilities of any operational underwater craft. Their description matched the British reports exactly. By 2200 hours on May 31st, 17 separate reports from 7 British ships and at least 2 German ships had reached various naval commands. 47 sailors had been direct witnesses. The pattern was undeniable. Something had been detected by hundreds of sailors across miles of ocean, something moving
faster than any submarine ever built, something glowing in the darkness beneath the waves, something that defied the laws of physics as understood in 1916. But what the British Admiralty did with these 17 reports in the next 12 hours would reveal something even more disturbing than the object itself.
The Admiralty's response was swift and absolute. Within 12 hours of the sighting, intelligence officers from the Naval Intelligence Division arrived aboard HMS Iron Duke. Commander Jeffrey Marsden from Naval Intelligence Section 12, a division specialized in unconventional submarine threats, conducted interrogations with all witnesses who had returned to Scapa Flow. Section 12 was a little-known intelligence unit within the Admiralty. Officially, its function was analyzing German U-boat tactics and developing countermeasures. Unofficially, it handled cases that didn't fit conventional categories. Marsden himself was an enigmatic figure. He'd served in naval intelligence since 1910, had been involved in counterintelligence operations against German spies, and had a reputation for being ruthlessly methodical. Officers who survived the war and spoke decades later remembered the interrogations with unsettling clarity. Captain William Hartford, interviewed by the BBC in 1968 at age 74, described the process in an oral history preserved in British broadcasting archives. "They interrogated us for hours. They wanted every detail, the exact depth, the exact speed, the precise color of the luminescence, how long it lasted, what angle the object took when diving, everything. And then they told us without any ambiguity that discussing the incident with anyone, even other crew members, would constitute a violation of the Official Secrets Act. The threat was explicit: court-martial, dismissal from service, possible imprisonment." Hartford continued. "What disturbed me most was they didn't seem surprised. Marsden and his officers took meticulous notes, asked very specific questions, but never showed shock or disbelief. It was like they were verifying details of something they already knew, not investigating something new. That was the impression I was left with. They already knew about this." All written records were confiscated. Logbooks, signal logs, hydrophone readings, personal diaries, anything documenting the event was seized. Lieutenant Commander Hartwell protested the confiscation of Turbulence deck log. His commander, Commander Blackwood, received orders directly from Admiral Jellicoe's staff overriding the protest. The orders cited critical operational security requirements for ongoing naval operations. Hartwell filed a formal objection through proper channels. The objection appears in personnel records preserved at the National Archives at Kew. The response to his objection doesn't exist in any archive. Witnesses were systematically separated. Hartwell was transferred to HMS Broke on June 15, 1916, 14 days after the incident. Able Seaman Grant was reassigned to shore duties at Portsmouth on June 18th. Commander Morrison of HMS Acasta found himself assigned to the Dover Patrol on June 22nd. Lieutenant Ashford of HMS Ophelia was transferred to Gibraltar Naval Station on June 25th. Lieutenant Commander Blackwell of HMS Garland received orders to report to the Naval War College at Portsmouth on June 28th. The official explanation was operational requirements and personnel rotation. The effect was scattering witnesses across the entire Royal Navy, ensuring they couldn't compare notes, coordinate testimony, or corroborate observations. The separation was so systematic, it seemed to follow a pre-established protocol, as if the Admiralty already had prepared procedures for this type of situation. But witness separation was just the beginning, because what was about to happen would reveal the Admiralty didn't just want to silence these men, they wanted to eliminate them permanently from the historical record.
Smash that subscribe button if these mass classification procedures are revealing a pattern to you, because the Admiralty's most disturbing decision hasn't arrived yet, and what they did with these witnesses in the following weeks is the most unsettling part of this entire story.
The pattern began within the first 6 weeks. Lieutenant Commander James Hartwell, 29 years old, HMS Broke, from Portsmouth. He documented the sighting in his personal diary
diary, a diary he managed to hide during the confiscation sweep. He sent letters home to his wife, Margaret, describing the incident with meticulous care. Those letters, donated to the Imperial War Museum by his family in 1989, include technical sketches of the hydrophone signature and the object's maneuvering patterns. The sketches show a level of detail only a trained officer could produce: exact time measurements, speed calculations, depth estimates based on acoustic attenuation. One of the letters includes a particularly detailed diagram showing the trajectory of the 3 torpedoes and the object's evasion maneuver. Hartwell had calculated the object's turning radius based on hydrophone data, approximately 50 feet for a 120-foot object moving at 60 knots. Executing a turn with a 50-foot radius required G-forces he calculated at approximately 30 Gs. Any human crew would have been instantly incapacitated. Within 3 days of arriving aboard HMS Broke, he was interrogated again by naval intelligence officers. This time, according to fellow officers aboard Broke, the interrogation was more aggressive. Lieutenant Peter Ashcroft, interviewed in 1974, stated, "Hartwell came out of that interrogation pale as death. He wouldn't talk about it. He isolated himself for days afterward. Something they told him had frightened him deeply. He stopped writing letters home. He stopped talking during meals. Something had changed." Ashcroft continued, "One night I found him on deck, staring at the sea. I asked if he was all right. He looked at me and said something I never forgot. 'Peter, if something happens to me, it won't be an accident. There are things in these waters we're not supposed to see, and men who'll ensure we don't remember seeing them.' I didn't understand what he meant at the time. After his death, I understood perfectly." In his last letter home, dated July 8, 1916, 8 days before his death, Hartwell wrote to his wife, "My dearest Margaret, if something should happen to me, understand that what I witnessed was real, despite what any official investigation may claim. I've been warned of the consequences of speaking further. There are patterns in these events we're not supposed to recognize. If my service ends abruptly, you must know I loved you, and that truth matters more than orders. Keep this letter. Don't show it to anyone in the service. I trust your judgment on when, if ever, it should be revealed. I've made copies of my sketches and hidden them in places where I hope they'll remain safe. If anyone ever asks about May 31st, you'll know what to say. Yours always, James."
On July 16, 1916, during a surface action against German destroyers in the Dover Strait, Lieutenant Commander James Hartwell died. Official cause: shell splinter from enemy fire. The medical report, filed by Broke's surgeon, Lieutenant Arthur Pemberton of the Royal Naval Voluntary Reserve, noted injuries inconsistent with standard fragmentation wounds. The wounds, according to Pemberton's private notes discovered after his death, were precise, almost surgical in nature, concentrated in areas that would cause rapid exsanguination. Pemberton, who'd treated hundreds of combat wounds during 2 years of war, knew how to distinguish between different types of trauma. Shell splinter wounds were characteristic: irregular, multiple trajectories, extensive tissue damage caused by randomly spinning fragments. Hartwell's wounds were different: clean cuts in specific arteries, the carotid, the femoral. The wounds seemed designed to cause rapid death by exsanguination. Pemberton requested an investigation. His request was denied by the ship's commander, citing operational tempo in wartime. Pemberton persisted. He filed a second request through medical channels. He died 3 weeks later when Broke struck a mine in the channel. The mine had been swept by minesweepers 2 hours earlier. No explanation was provided for its presence. Hartwell's personal effects, including his hidden diary, were scheduled to return to his widow. They never arrived. Naval records show the effects were sent through proper channels. On July 20th, 1916, Margaret Hartwell received notification that her husband's personal items were lost in transit.
She filed inquiries for 18 months. No items were ever recovered. His diary, containing detailed accounts of the May 31st sighting, vanished into the classification system. Able seaman Thomas Grant, HMS Turbulence hydrophone operator, 23 years old, from Liverpool. He had the most direct technical knowledge of the contact. He'd been listening to its acoustic signature for 18 minutes. After his reassignment to Portsmouth, he wrote to his parents describing something in the water that Naval Command doesn't want to transmitted by his family and examined by researchers in 2003 mention repeated visits from intelligence officers asking the same questions over and over. Grant wrote in a letter dated August 15, 1916, "Mom, Dad, men from the Admiralty keep coming to ask me questions about the night of May 31st. They want to know exactly what I heard, how long it lasted, what I told Lieutenant Commander Hartwell. They tell me it's important for naval security, but there's something odd about all this. I can't explain it well in a letter. When I get leave in October, we'll talk." He never got that October leave. In September 1916, 3 months after the incident, Grant was reassigned to HMS Hampshire II for convoy service in the Atlantic. On October 12, 1916, while on leave in Liverpool, he fell from a railway platform at Lime Street Station directly in front of an arriving train.
He died instantly. Witnesses reported he'd been standing well back from the platform edge moments before. No one saw him move forward. No one saw him stumble. The inquest ruled accidental death within 48 hours. One witness, a station porter named William Edwards, told investigators he saw 2 men in naval uniform talking to Grant moments before he fell. Edwards described the men as well-dressed, speaking quietly with Grant. They seemed to be showing him something, perhaps documents. Grant appeared agitated. Then, suddenly, Grant stepped back and fell. It all happened very fast. The 2 men left immediately after, before police arrived. This testimony doesn't appear in the official inquest report. Edwards disappeared 2 weeks later. He was found drowned in the Mersey. The death was ruled suicide. No note was found. Commander Edward Morrison, HMS Acasta, 37 years old, from Edinburgh. He'd filed one of the most detailed reports about the contact, including precise technical specifications about the anomalous acoustic signature. He was transferred to HMS Venomous in July 1916, then to shore duties at Rosyth in August. In November 1916, he was diagnosed with acute neurasthenia, what we'd now call post-traumatic stress disorder. His medical file, accessible through the National Archives until it was restricted in 2009, describes persistent claims of having witnessed advanced submarine technology during Jutland action. The file notes, patient rational in all matters except his insistence that the May 31st contact was not a German submarine, maintains detailed technical arguments for why the object's performance characteristics exceeded any known craft, provides precise mathematical calculations, cites hydrodynamic principles, references engineering specifications. The coherence of his technical reasoning makes the case particularly troubling. The doctors who evaluated Morrison noted his technical reasoning capacity remained intact. He could discuss other aspects of naval warfare with perfect lucidity. He could analyze battle tactics, evaluate ship designs, calculate ballistic trajectories. His obsession was specifically about the May 31st contact. He was admitted to Craig Lockhart War Hospital in Scotland in December 1916. He died there on February 8, 1917. Official cause, complications from pneumonia. Hospital records note he'd been in isolation for 3 weeks before his death, receiving no visitors. His wife, Elizabeth Morrison, requested access to his medical files in 1919. Her request was denied on grounds of patient confidentiality and national
national security. The medical files remain sealed until 2045. Lieutenant Robert Ashford, HMS Ophelia, 32 years old, from London. He'd reported visual contact with the submerged luminescence and provided luminous intensity calculations. In August 1916, he was transferred to Gibraltar. In November 1916, he died during what was described as a torpedo training accident.
A defective torpedo allegedly detonated prematurely during exercises. Ashford was supervising from a distance that should have been safe, over 100 yards from the launch zone. The explosion killed him and 3 other sailors. A naval investigation found a torpedo had been inspected and certified functional 3 hours earlier. The torpedo was a Mark 8, the same type used by Turbulent. Mark 8 torpedoes had an excellent safety record. Premature detonations were extremely rare, occurring in less than 1% of launches. The cause of the malfunction couldn't be determined. The torpedo's maintenance records, which should be archived, can't be located. Lieutenant Commander Henry Blackwell, HMS Garland, 41 years old, from Cardiff. He'd ordered depth charges launched against the object. His report included the crucial observation that the depth charges didn't affect the contact at all. He was transferred to the Naval War College at Portsmouth in June 1916. In January 1917, during a nighttime training drill in Portsmouth Harbor, he fell overboard from a small boat. He drowned before he could be rescued. He was an experienced swimmer who'd completed sea survival qualifications. Water conditions that night were calm. Water temperature was 11 degrees Celsius, cold but not immediately incapacitating. The investigation concluded he probably suffered cramps and panicked. No witnesses saw the moment he fell into the water. His body was recovered 3 hours later. By July 1917, 14 months after the sighting, 12 of the 47 documented witnesses were dead. The mortality rate was statistically impossible. These weren't men in the same unit suffering collective casualties in a single battle. These were individuals scattered across different divisions, different armies, even different countries. Yet they were dying at a rate that defied probability. Naval researcher Dr. Robert Ashworth calculated in 2006 that the probability of 12 specific witnesses to a single event dying within 14 months from apparently unrelated causes was approximately 150,000 to 1. To contextualize this statistic, the overall mortality rate for British naval officers during World War I was approximately 8% annually. For enlisted sailors, it was 12%. These rates include all causes, combat, disease, accidents. The mortality rate among Jutland witnesses was 25% in 14 months, more than double the expected rate, and the deaths didn't follow the typical pattern of war casualties. Most didn't die in direct combat against German forces. They died in accidents, suicides, diseases in isolation hospitals, unexplainable equipment malfunctions, coincidences. But the elimination pattern didn't end with the original witnesses, because decades later, when researchers tried to document the case, they discovered the suppression machinery was still operational.
The incident might have remained buried forever if not for Dr. Michael Thornton, a naval historian at Cambridge University. In 1982, while researching British naval communications during Jutland, he discovered a coded reference in signal logs to anomalous submarine contact requiring immediate classification. The reference was brief, barely a line in a signal log containing thousands of communications, but something about the phrase caught Thornton's attention. Immediate classification was a term that rarely appeared in wartime naval records. Most communications were simply secret or confidential. The term immediate classification suggested something different, something requiring active suppression rather than simple confidentiality. What began as academic curiosity became obsession. For 8 years, Thornton tracked down 3 surviving witnesses, obtained fragments of declassified documents through meticulous Freedom of Information requests, and reconstructed what had been carefully dismantled. The 3 surviving witnesses Thornton located were men in their 80s and 90s. One had been an enlisted sailor on HMS Lion, another had been a junior officer on HMS Garland, the third had served on HMS Acasta under Morrison. All 3 remembered the incident with surprising clarity, despite over 60 years having passed. He published his preliminary findings in the Journal of Naval History in 1990. The article, titled Unidentified Contacts at Jutland, Evidence of Systematic Suppression, presented documentation about the multiple detections and the witness mortality pattern. The article included detailed statistical analysis, citations from declassified documents, and testimony from the 3 survivors. Thornton argued meticulously that the suppression pattern and mortality pattern couldn't be coincidence. 3 weeks after publication, his office at Cambridge was ransacked. Only his Jutland research files were taken. Computers, valuable equipment, other research projects, all left untouched. The thieves clearly knew what they were looking for. They bypassed an Apple Macintosh computer worth several £1,000s. They ignored manuscripts from other historical projects. They took only folders and documents related to Jutland. Thornton reported the theft to Cambridge police. The investigation was closed after 2 weeks without identifying suspects. The detective assigned to the case told Thornton, "Sir, this is odd. Normally, when they break into a university office, they take electronic equipment. These individuals knew exactly what they wanted. That suggests someone told them specifically what to look for. Any idea who might be so interested in your historical research?" Thornton rebuilt his research from backup copies he'd kept at home. On April 3, 1991, while driving from Cambridge to London to present his expanded research at a naval history conference, his car was forced off the M11 motorway.
The driver of the other vehicle didn't stop. Witnesses to the accident described a dark sedan, possibly a Rover, that deliberately cut across Thornton's car, forcing it onto the shoulder. The sedan then accelerated and disappeared. No one could get the license plate. Thornton suffered serious injuries, including severe head trauma. He was in a coma for 17 days. When he woke, he suffered from partial amnesia. His memories of the Jutland investigation were fragmented. Doctors explained the head trauma had specifically damaged brain areas associated with long-term memory. Ironically, his memories of other aspects of his life remained intact. He remembered his childhood, his education, his other research projects, but the specific details of his Jutland investigation, witness names, document locations, connections he'd established, were lost. He never completed his work. The rebuilt files disappeared from his office while he was hospitalized. This time, no theft was reported. They simply weren't there anymore. University cleaning staff reported seeing men in dark suits leaving the history building one night with boxes of files. They assumed they were university administrators moving materials. In 2003, naval journalist Sarah Mitchell began investigating the case after interviewing the son of one of the original witnesses. Mitchell was an investigative reporter for The Guardian with 15 years of experience covering defense matters. She'd previously had success exposing Ministry of Defense cover-ups related to chemical weapons testing at Porton Down, radiation experiments on sailors, and mishandling of Gulf War syndrome cases. She was known for her ability to penetrate military secrecy and obtain classified documents through carefully cultivated sources. She applied the same investigative techniques to the Jutland case. For 2 years, she filed multiple Freedom of Information requests, interviewed descendants of witnesses, and obtained documents from German archives confirming their own sightings of the object. Mitchell had developed sources within the Ministry of Defense who provided her with information about classification procedures. An anonymous source told her, "Sarah, this case is different. I've seen documents classified for 50 years, 75 years. Jutland is sealed for 130 years. That only happens when there's something they really don't want anyone to see, probably ever." In September 2005, she was preparing an extensive article about the case for publication in The Guardian. On September 23, 2005, Mitchell was found dead in her London flat. Official cause?
Cause: overdose of sleeping pills combined with alcohol. The inquest ruled suicide.
Close friends and colleagues expressed shock, insisting Mitchell showed no signs of depression and was enthusiastic about her Jutland investigation. Her editor at The Guardian, Robert Hardley, said in a 2006 interview, "Sarah was more animated than I had seen her in years. She talked constantly about the Jutland story. She said it was going to be the most important exposure of her career. She had a meeting scheduled with me for September 26th to review the final article. The idea she killed herself right before publication makes no sense whatsoever. I'd known Sarah for 10 years. This wasn't suicide." Mitchell had sent an email to a friend on September 22nd, the day before her death. "I finally got all the pieces together. This article is going to change how we think about Jutland. See you to celebrate this weekend." Doesn't sound like someone planning to kill themselves 24 hours later. No suicide note was found. Her research files on Jutland disappeared from her flat. Police concluded she'd probably discarded them before her death. This explanation was absurd. Mitchell was meticulous with her files. She'd spent 2 years accumulating documentation. The idea she simply threw them in the trash before killing herself contradicted everything her colleagues knew about her. Her laptop computer, which contained all her digital documents, was never recovered. The police report indicated there was no laptop in her flat when she was found. Her colleagues insisted Mitchell carried her laptop with her constantly, even at home. The Jutland article was never published. 3 researchers, 3 attempts to document the case, 3 permanent interruptions. The pattern that began in 1916 continued operating nearly 90 years later.
Official records remain largely classified. The original reports filed by HMS Turbulent, HMS Acasta, HMS Ophelia, HMS Garland, HMS Lion, and other ships are held at the National Archives at Kew under reference ADM 137/1944. Classification level: restricted naval intelligence. Sealed until 2046, 130 years after the incident. In 2004, naval historian Dr. Robert Ashworth filed a petition for partial declassification under the Freedom of Information Act. His petition specifically sought hydrophone records and signal traffic related to unidentified contacts during Jutland operations. The petition was reviewed by the Ministry of Defense. The response, received 14 months later, stated, "Disclosure of the requested material would be contrary to the public interest and could compromise national security. The material contains sensitive information related to naval detection capabilities that remain classified." No further explanation was provided. The public interest argument wasn't elaborated upon. Ashworth filed an appeal asking how hydrophone records from 1916 could compromise national security in 2005. The 1916 hydrophone was primitive technology. It worked by detecting pressure waves in water. Modern sonar technology is 1,000 times more sophisticated. Current underwater detection systems use sophisticated sensor arrays, digital signal processing, artificial intelligence to filter ocean noise. The idea that hydrophone records from nearly a century ago could reveal anything sensitive about modern detection capabilities was absurd.
The appeal was denied without additional comment. Files that have been partially released are heavily redacted. A 2008 release of Grand Fleet War Diaries from May and June 1916 included 237 pages. 104 pages were so heavily redacted they contained fewer than 10 legible words per page. Entire pages appeared as black rectangles with maybe an article, the, a, or of occasionally visible. Complete sentences were obliterated. Names, locations, technical details, all removed. Sections corresponding to the afternoon of May 31st and early morning of June 1st were removed entirely, with notation exempt under Section 26, National Security and Defense. The pages weren't simply redacted, they'd been physically removed from the file. Researchers examining the documents noted the pages had been cut from the logbook, leaving only small stubs in the binding. The Jutland contact wasn't isolated. Between 1914 and 1918,
2018, naval records contain references to at least 19 similar incidents across multiple naval theaters. North Sea, August 1914, HMS Pathfinder, days before being sunk by U-21, becoming the first warship sunk by submarine in history, reported hydrophone contact with high-speed submerged object displaying luminescence.
7 witnesses. Report classified by Admiralty Intelligence within 24 hours. Mediterranean, March 1915. French destroyer Boutefeu reported contact with submersible object moving at impossible speed near the Dardanelles, described as emitting phosphorescent glow inconsistent with any known marine phenomenon. Boutefeu's commander, Capitaine de Frégate Henri Moreau, filed a detailed report. He was killed 2 weeks later during the initial Gallipoli landings. Official cause, Turkish sniper fire from a distance exceeding the effective range of Ottoman rifles by 300 meters. Moreau's body was found with a single wound, a rifle shot to the head. The angle of the wound suggested an elevated shooter, but the Ottomans didn't have snipers in that location, according to tactical maps, and the estimated distance, over 600 meters, exceeded the capabilities of any standard infantry rifle. Atlantic, September 1917, USS Jacob Jones, operating on anti-submarine patrol, detected submerged contact moving at estimated 60 knots or more. U.S. naval records accessible at the National Archives in Washington describe the contact as unlike any U-boat signature on record. Jacob Jones was torpedoed and sunk by U-53 2 months later, the only American destroyer lost to enemy action in World War I. The geographical spread was enormous. The timeline spanned the entire war. The descriptions, despite coming from witnesses who couldn't possibly have communicated with each other, showed impossible consistency. High speed, luminescence, instantaneous acceleration, silent operation, depth capabilities exceeding any submarine of the era. Official explanations, when they existed, attributed sightings to equipment malfunction, whale activity, or misidentified friendly submarines. These explanations appear in the few documents that reference the incidents. They're presented without supporting evidence. They ignore testimony from experienced hydrophone operators and qualified naval officers. They don't address the technical impossibilities. They're dismissals rather than explanations. What they never attempted to explain was why, if these were equipment errors or natural phenomena, such extreme measures were taken to suppress the reports. Why classify routine hydrophone malfunctions? Why scatter witnesses? Why eliminate testimony? Why keep files sealed for 130 years for an event that was supposedly just a misidentification? Drop a subscribe if this video changed your perspective on what the British Royal Navy really detected beneath the waves at Jutland. Because every week I break down classified testimony governments don't want you to know about. Suppressed stories revealing truths that have remained hidden for over a century.